in Stanford, Fairfield County. We need labor. We need educated labor. So we looked at the test scores in the Bronx. And we looked at Co-op City. There's a lot of people from Connecticut, when they drive down, the thruway, think Co-op City is like public housing, and terrible school system. So we looked at the school system in the Bronx. And yes, there's some really crappy schools in the Bronx, as there are in Connecticut. But in general, those test scores were equal or better than what we saw in Connecticut. So we want access into that labor market. And the Bronx wants to open up that whole area of the Bronx, which doesn't have rail service, which allows us to take the Hellgate line, which is a commuter line, it's the Amtrak line, and make it a commuter line linking in New Rochelle into the Bronx, and then into New York City, crossing Long Island. So just here, I was thinking about it, it's really quite amazing. We're just doing this because we are desperate for labor. We know the economy's coming back, we need skilled labor, and we're going to get it where we can get it. And the Tappan Zee Bridge is another big issue for us, because our labor force, 20% of it from Fairfield County is coming from Westchester, and now coming from Jersey across the Tappan Zee Bridge. Okay, so just hold that concept. So now we're looking at the New Haven line, and we're looking at transit investments, and we're looking at the New Haven to Springfield line. And I'm looking at it going, this is incredible. We can access the Bronx if we make these investments with an alliance with the Bronx Borough President in his office, and we can make an alliance with the state of Connecticut to invest in the Springfield line, giving people in Meriden the opportunity to work in Stanford, but also companies in Stanford that can move to Meriden because they have access to a different labor pool. So this is a win-win. And what really struck me is I go back to when I was Commissioner with Whitener of Economic Development, and I'm sitting here with legislators and advocates. We could not have this discussion 20 years ago. We talked about cities, and we talked about housing and historic preservation and rebuilding cities, but we never talked about the power of transit. It was always, transit was about highways, and highways and transit was somehow in conflict because 90% of the people come to work by car, so why would we put money into transit? And now we see this much more as an integrated fashion, that the highway, the bus system, and the rail work together, and then allows economic growth to really flourish better. Now here's the thing, TOD is complex, and government has a hard time with this complex stuff. There are jurisdictional issues. We look at, for instance, very carefully, Maryland and Washington on this issue of TOD, and we look at the Bay Area in California. And what shows up there repeatedly is three things. One, someone's got to plan this. Somebody's got to be really responsible to put the pieces together. And in doing that, the relationship between state government and the local jurisdiction, municipal government, is always a critical issue. How is power shared? And the third big piece is finance. The real problem with Maryland, the subway system, the Washington subway system, great system, they never figured out how to finance it. There's no revenue source. So they're constantly fighting over what's Maryland's share, what's Virginia's share, and what's the federal government going to kick in. And then the federal government in a panic nails about $3 billion in 10 years. This is not what we want to do. So we can learn from what they did wrong. The other fourth issue is the issue of scale. And I'll just give you a quick one. I used to live in Washington, and at one point I lived in Bethesda. And Bethesda was a town like Fairfield. It's zoning at that, this is back in the 70s, from Magee, I'm trying to age here. But okay, Bethesda was like Fairfield. Commercial buildings with 4 stories, and mostly with single-family houses with some apartment buildings. So now the subway system comes in. Bethesda now is like Manhattan. It's got high-rise buildings around the train station at one big scale, and then has apartment buildings, and then it steps down to residential. Now the question is, that works for Bethesda. Bethesda made that decision in their local zoning to capture this value of the train station. I'm not sure if Fairfield wants to do that. I'm not sure I want to see that happen, 20-story buildings in the center of Fairfield. Just my personal opinion. The point I'm driving at, though, is local zoning has got to buy into this vision. There's got to be a state role, but then there's got to be a clear, we have to really make this decision early on so we don't screw this up like some other people have done. What do we want our communities to look like? And there's got to be local options built into this state investment. Okay? So these, I think, are the big issues. There may be some others, but these are really big issues. What we want to use with the panel, which we have a very diverse panel, is they'll each do 3 to 5 minutes, kind of around those themes, how they see it, how they see affordable housing fitting in, how do municipalities, how does a private developer look at this, right? I mean, how does a local municipality look at it, okay? And then we'll kind of talk among ourselves, and then we'll open up for questions, okay? But this is a big decision of how to put this together. All right, so why don't we start, I think we're going to start with, Shelby, are you doing your payment? Okay, so Shelby, why don't you talk about the housing piece, and what the partnership is doing, particularly the new affordable housing zoning stuff.